Okay, well, welcome. I see an Amanda, a Ritesh, tell me if I said that wrong, a Lauren, and a Caroline, as well as our folks I can actually physically see. So welcome, everyone. My name is Alana Zivkovic. I am the CEO of Werq, and excited to be with you guys today. I'm going to actually share a deck in a minute so you have something visually to ground what I'm saying to. But before we kick off, the Common Desk team here is going to be moderating. So as arise, please feel free to use the chat box to type those in as we go. I'll be checking in with the moderators throughout and pausing to answer questions as they come up. And then we'll have some time for actual live spoken questions at the end as well. And you guys are all our Zoom experts. Everyone is on mute already, so please continue doing that. That's really, really helpful. So I'm going to share my screen here. Share. Okay, can you see my screen? Give me a nod or a high five or something. Okay, thank you. Now, sorry, let me just make it so you can see it big. Present, there we go. Okay, so topic of today, 12 actions working now, leadership during COVID-19. Just to ground this information, I want you guys to know where it came from. Werq is an executive coaching firm. However, what you're about to hear today, these are not just our musings about what we think might work. When this crisis first hit, as we were just discussing before we went live on the recording, it happened so fast. You know, for most of the people in our general areas, it seemed like one day we were out, you know, going to dinner and attending events and whatever, and almost overnight, businesses were shut down. Everyone was encouraged to stay home, and then there was actually the, you know, shelter-in-place order that came. It happened really, really quickly. And when that did, we at Werq asked ourselves just how can we show up for our community, for our clients, for our partners, even just for, you know, folks that we know and care about in the community, in the business community specifically. And we started getting lots of calls from leaders. Some of them are clients, some of them just people that we know, asking very similar questions again and again, struggling with very similar types of concerns again and again. So what we decided in those first couple of weeks was that we would offer some executive coaching groups specifically around how to show up and be an effective leader during this crisis. We ended up hosting 5 groups in total. About 40 different leaders attended those groups, sort of spread out over the different ones. They were coaching in nature. So coaching, for those that aren't exposed to it, is very much about identifying where are we at now, where do we want to be, and then most specifically, what actions do we need to take, what steps to bridge that gap. Coaching is very action-oriented. So within those groups, we heard from leaders, and again, these themes just came up, and they were just, you know, slapping us in the face. They were so right there and so obvious. Some of the leaders that we had on the call, they were from all over the country. Some represented, you know, were C-level members at multi-billion-dollar publicly traded companies. Others were sole proprietors at, you know, an individual running a startup or a, you know, single person business. So the entire spectrum in between. They came from all sorts of different sectors. But what we're going to present for you today are based on what we heard from all those folks, what is actually working now. As things have sort of continued, you know, in the last, I would say, week and a half, the culture around COVID seems to be stabilizing a little bit. People are talking about developing a new normal. It's kind of the word I'm hearing a lot. But these things really do remain as within the face of this unprecedented, unpredictable, and in many ways very challenging circumstance, what do we need to be focused on as leaders? So again, post questions if you have them, and Common Desk folks, I don't know, wiggle at me or something when a question comes up so I can pause. Thank you, Olivia, that's perfect. So 12 actions working now, starting off. Ooh, if it'll let me. There we go. Number 1, this was the biggest thing across the board. Be relentlessly honest. And I'm going to tell you guys, this starts, Katie and I were actually talking about this before you hopped on. This starts with relentless honesty with ourselves. We humans, when faced with things that are very challenging, we have some natural instincts. You may have heard of like fight, flight, or freeze. We have some natural ways we want to deal when things get hard. And part of what that can look like is not being honest with ourselves about what's going on, not being honest about what it's bringing up for us, not being honest about what it means for our business, not being honest about what it could mean in the future. So the number one thing was, we know that this is hard. It's hard on everyone. There's challenges coming out of every corner, but you have to do your due diligence. You have to look at the situation for what it is and not do yourself or those around you the disservice of being dishonest, including, again, when it's personal, when you're just the one struggling. I have a toddler and my partner and I both work full time. So here we are, we're figuring it out. And some days are easier than others, but I have to be really honest with myself when I'm like, whoo, I need a bike ride. I need something different for a minute. That relentless honesty then that starts within us then extends to our teams. So, one of the big questions, and we'll get to this more in some of the next comments, but one of the big topics that leaders were struggling with was, what do I tell my team? How do I do this? I don't really know what's coming around the next corner. So what do I tell them? And the big comment here was to be honest. Be honest about what you know. Be honest about what you don't know. Be careful to never overpromise and underdeliver. If your business is in a sector that is likely to continue to experience some hardfall based on what's going on our international scale, don't tell your employees, hey, don't worry, nothing bad will happen. Your bonuses are intact. If that's not something that you can actually promise to, don't say it. People are not unwise. Everyone can see what's going on in this situation. And while there's lots of fear kicked up and we may want to sort of protect our people as leaders or in some way shield them from it, we can't. And so be honest, be honest, be honest, be honest. That was number one. Number two, and this was just, barely even behind be honest. This was a theme on every one of our calls. Number two was over communicate. So, as mentioned, we went literally, it felt like overnight. It probably was more than that, but it felt so fast that we went from, especially in a common desk type of a situation, we're all there, we're together every day, we're seeing each other. If you have a team in your business, folks were out and about and around. Now everyone's at home, and not just at home in terms of their work hours, but at home all the time. We have a video, maybe we can link it when we share this deck, but we have a video that we actually made, 5 months ago or something, which was about how to remain connected, how to maintain connectivity on a remote team. And one of the things that the research shows is that when people go to working remote, one of the biggest things that ends up getting in the way of that being effective is there's this common feeling of isolation. That makes sense, right? Isolation then can lead us to take less risks, can lead us to be less engaged, certainly less productive. Isolation is a big problem when it comes to work efficacy. And so across the board, our leaders were talking about all the different things they were doing to over communicate at this time with their staff, with their peers, with their clients, if they had clients or their customers, with their vendors even, going out of their way. Some folks shared about moving to having daily stand-up meetings or daily huddles, little 15-minute Zoom or phone-based check-ins where they could just keep a beat on their team. Others tackling one-on-ones with each of their team members at least once a week. Oftentimes, at first it was like once a day, just really communicating, staying in front of whatever it is that was coming up because things were changing so rapidly. And in some ways they still are. That over communication, as I mentioned, it extended to vendors. Lots of leaders talked about being very proactive and wanting to reach out to their vendors to let them know, hey, this is a tough situation and we plan to continue. Or if that's not the case, we don't plan to continue. The research shows us that trust, which is extremely valuable in life and in business, trust is most easily built during times of crisis. How we show up for each other during a time of crisis is our fastest way to build trust. And so I encourage you just to think about that. Think about it with your teams, think about it with your boss, think about it with, if you have one, think about it with your vendors, with your clients, etc. And over communication is part of the way that we build trust at a time like this. Getting out in front of it, asking the awkward questions, placing a call and talking about what you need, but over communicate. Number 3, and this goes back to what we were talking about with isolation, the leaders who seem to be taking this in stride and handling it really effectively, they were actively finding ways to bond remotely. Lots of the clients that we work with, they're hosting Zoom happy hours once a week. They're having little competitions. Like one of our clients, this year their sort of internal swag was a really nice jacket. And so they created a competition, and it was, $100 for whoever sends the coolest pic of them in the jacket. And you had people with their kids on their shoulders and people all wrapped up crazy to go for a bike ride with, masks and whatever, and etc. So, finding ways to bond remotely, recognizing that our workforce is comprised of humans. Every human in this circumstance is experiencing it in their own way. I'm sure, as you guys get on the phone with your friends, family, and teammates, some people are full of optimism and hope. Others are depressed and anxious. Others are vacillating between the two. You may have experienced some of that yourself. So finding ways to bond remotely to keep those connections really solid right now is a gift, both to yourself and to those around you. And the leaders who we spoke with that were really utilizing this time as something to fuel them, they were active in this. They were not passive. They were not waiting for it to come to them. They were creating ways to bond remotely. Number 4, play the long game. I have a friend, he's an author and a speaker and an entrepreneur. He has a whole series on this topic, playing the long game. What this refers to is, rather than choosing short-term gain, you make the tough calls, you make the sometimes self-sacrificing decisions that put you in a position to, in the long run, be in a good spot with your staff, with your clients or customers, with your vendors, etc. Think about this time. The leaders that we spoke to who seem to be handling this really well, they were thinking about this time not so much in the current moment, not so much about all the crises, although that was part of it. They were thinking about what stories would be told about them later. What could they do today that folks would really remember tomorrow? If, a tenant, if they owned a property and a tenant came to them and said, hey, here are the 17 things that are going on that are making it impossible to pay my rent. Can you work with me on it? If they were in a financial position to work with them on it, they said yes. It's a time to figure out internally, and certainly in our business relationships, our contracts, etc. How can we play the long game? It's a situation where many of us can't offer much financially or otherwise. You may not have much to offer. However, what can you offer, and where you can do? We had people tell us lots of stories about little things they were doing to go above and beyond with various people in their professional lives. And the expressions of gratitude that were coming back to them are things that will be remembered a lot longer than the actual moment in the virus. So playing the long game, having that long-term approach, figuring out what is it that you can do today for yourself, your team, and those around you that can make this experience one that actually is remembered with you as sort of almost the hero of the story, right? You as part of the solution. So play the long game. Number 5, and this is a whole additional can of worms here. Maybe a topic for a second training. But number 5 was, leaders were delivering hard news effectively. There's a lot of hard news going around right now. We cannot hide from that. The effects on the economy, and therefore on jobs, on contracts, on people's lives, even on health. The basics of this is a pandemic. There's a lot of really severe, obviously, health concerns as well as consequences going on. So leaders who were rising to the challenge were focused on how to deliver hard news effectively, and looking for a couple of things when they did so. Number 1 was compassion. We've talked to a lot of leaders that have had to conduct layoffs or furloughs or reduce, pay for their employees, or close down a whole site, or, et cetera, et cetera. So number 1 was compassion, really recognizing that all of us are struggling in this moment and treating their messaging from a place of compassion, from a place of, human awareness on how hard this is on everyone. Number 2 was clarity. Number 2. So this relates back to our first point around relentless honesty. When it comes to delivering hard news, especially the leaders that we've spoken with that had to do those really tough things with their workforce, furloughs, layoffs, pay cuts, that sort of thing, they had taken a lot of time before ever coming to their staff to get really clear on why they were doing what they were doing, what exactly they were doing, not some amorphous, like, we may or may not cut your pay. I don't know, maybe come to the office, maybe do, none of that. Really focus on being very clear and then being very consistent. So if you have a leadership team, meaning multiple people that may be delivering similar hard news in different facets, making sure that everyone was on the same page. The leaders we spoke with, they had lots of different meetings, lots of different ways that they cascaded information to make sure that the message was ultimately compassionate, clear, and consistent. Some companies, depending on the size that you're in, it can be natural for sort of the CEO or founder or president, whatever the title may be, to be the one to deliver most hard news. But if you're in, or most news in general, depending on the size of the company, but if you're in a larger company that has some layers, those folks were talking about how they were empowering the next layer down and next layer down and next layer down of leader, so that there could be more of that compassionate sort of individualized conversations going on, rather than one big message, having one big message then supported by those down the ranks that may have a closer relationship with people receiving it, so that the information could be translated in a way that was as effective as possible. Again, we cannot protect our people from the reality of the situation, but we can do our work so that when delivering the message, it can be received in as effective a way as possible. So, delivering hard news effectively. Number 6, and this one was big. We hear it all the time on the plane. Put your own oxygen mask on first. As I mentioned earlier, I have a toddler, and we historically travel a lot. And any of you that have young kids, if you're on a plane, most airlines have a protocol. The flight attendants will come walk by your seat, and they'll look at you and they'll say, ma'am or sir, in the case of an emergency, put your own oxygen mask on first before helping your kid. And if it's my husband and I traveling together, we look up at them and we nod our head yes, because they won't leave you alone until you nod your head yes. And then we look at each other and we kind of wink and we're like, whatever, we're totally taking care of our kid first, because it's instinct. It's human instinct. We want to protect those that we care about. But in this moment in time, as leaders, the responsibilities on our plate are huge. There are people within our company and outside of it that are relying on us. And the folks who we spoke with, who were able to show up on a daily basis and do what they needed to do, be who they needed to be, they were doing that because they recognized what they needed for themselves, and they were making sure to keep their bucket as full as possible. For you, that could be exercise. It could be social time via Zoom or whatever with friends. It could be making sure you get enough sleep at night, or just drinking enough water, or prayer, meditation, whatever it is that you can access at this moment in time, based on your own awareness of yourself, to keep your bucket full, to keep yourself in a good position. That is absolutely necessary. Stress does weird things to the individual, and it does weird things to the population. So as leaders right now, we don't have the luxury of letting ourselves freak out. So despite my husband and I not wanting to follow the guidance of the flight attendants, at this moment, this really can't be ignored, even if it's small things. If it's getting out for a walk around your block between 2 very stressful meetings, whatever the case may be, figure out how to get your own oxygen mask on. And let me just check in. Do we have any questions coming up? No. Okay. Thanks, Olivia. Okay. Number 7, this one was really interesting. Develop industry-specific KPIs. So moving more into the business functionality part. Some of the leaders that we spoke with, they, this situation is so unprecedented, obviously. What's happening in our market is very scary economically, and no one really knows what's around the next corner. No one can really predict what next week looks like, next month, next year, despite their best intentions. We don't have a blueprint to work from here. So the leaders who we spoke with that were trying to tackle that head on, they developed industry-specific KPIs that they could then lean on their team, empower their team to track on a daily or weekly basis. Examples of this could be, we work with a recruiting firm and they were tracking rates of unemployment within their sector, rates of joblessness. We work with an aviation firm. They were tracking all sorts of different metrics around projected government stimulus around supporting the airline industry. How many planes had been grounded on any given week, what the regulations were on that, et cetera, et cetera. But tracking industry-specific KPIs does three things, arguably. Number one, from a business perspective, it puts those businesses in a place to be able to be more proactive, to be able to respond and take action before they just wait to hear it on CNN or Fox or whatever channel, before they just wait passively to receive information. They were putting themselves in a position to be able to be more strategic, number one. Number two, they were engaging their workforce in being part of that solution with them, which increases a sense of control. And I say sense because we don't really, internal locus of control, external locus of control, so much of this is outside of our control. But the research on experiencing a sense of control is really significant. If you go to a well-run assisted living facility for the elderly, you'll notice that they give the elderly or their, nursing home style patients lots of little choices. Where do you want to sit today, Mr. Smith? Would you like a pink napkin or a green one, Mrs. Hollis, whatever? They give them lots of little choices. And what the research has found is that just experiencing that agency, having those small choices amongst those populations, helps maintain their mental acuity, stave off depression, decrease anxiety and stress, increase mental well-being. And the hypothesis behind that research is we need to feel some sort of power as human beings. We need to feel like we're not just being swept along by the ebb and flow of, powers outside of ourselves. So by giving assisted living center patients just a little bit of agency, a little bit of choice, it actually increased their overall health, their overall well-being. Same thing is going on these teams that we talk about, where their team members are the ones tracking the KPIs. All of a sudden they feel like, gosh, I'm not just sitting back and waiting for the world to end. I am doing something to help map our path towards a better future, right? So being proactive and strategic, engaging the team members. And then number three was going back to one of our previous points around increasing those bonds, right? When everyone could rally around and start to collect those KPIs, all of a sudden we have this current immediate project that we're all participating in. We started seeing team members come up with their own KPIs and access their own databases to collect them, et cetera, and having a really positive impact on those teams. So developing industry-specific KPIs. Anything from our people, Olivia? Okay. Number 8, this one's happy. Surprise and delight. There's so much heavy. There's so much stuff that frankly sucks right now. If you haven't had a day yet where you wake up and you go, ugh, I do not like this. I think this sucks. It's probably coming. I have. Because there's lots about this that just really sucks. So where we can't, thank you. Someone raised their hand. I'm not alone. And I'm a very honestly positive person, but there's parts of this that just suck. So anyways, surprise and delight. We heard from leaders all these things that they were doing to surprise and delight the people in their orbit in ways that you can't do in a normal, or you wouldn't think to do in a normal situation. So for example, one leader had a coffee meeting scheduled with a candidate that they had been looking to bring into their business. And obviously they could no longer meet for coffee. So what they did was they reached out to the leader or to the candidate before the meeting and asked them what their favorite Starbucks drink was. This candidate happened to be in a whole different state. So it wasn't like they were even just, down the block. They had been planning to fly in. And this leader then door dashed that candidate's favorite Starbucks to their house so that when they met for their coffee meeting, they could actually share a cup of coffee. And the candidate then goes, oh my gosh, someone rang my doorbell. First of all, that's amazing. There's human contact, but how thoughtful, how memorable. So looking for ways to surprise and delight. Maybe if your business is in the position, maybe if some of your clients or customers are struggling to make ends meet because of what's going on in their business, maybe you push back the due date for your next invoice and just say, hey, I want to offer you an extra 4 weeks to get this paid without any penalty, if you're in a position to do that. Maybe you send to each of your team members for their virtual happy hour. Maybe you DoorDash some of their favorite treats, et cetera, et cetera. But looking for ways to surprise and delight at this moment, it means a lot. It always means a lot, but it means a whole lot right now. So looking for ways to surprise and delight. Number 9, I love this one, establishing consultation groups. A lot of the leaders we spoke with, they talked about calling on their networks in ways that they hadn't done probably for years. So these would be peers, former bosses, colleagues, typically folks, maybe a few from inside of your company, but oftentimes folks from outside of your immediate company. These leaders would get together, these peer free, obviously just consultation groups. And they would talk about within our industry, within our sector, our area, whatever, what's going on? What are you guys doing to address it? Where are your pain points? What ideas do you have? Let me share with you what I'm doing. We've seen more free sharing of information and support based on this crisis than at any other time, at least from our vantage point. And the leaders who were utilizing this really effectively, some of them were either the ones that were creating the group. So they were reaching out and going, okay, I lead this business. I know these 6 people that lead a very similar business. I'm going to see if they all want to get on a Zoom and just share, collaborate, figure out what's going on and how we can help each other. So they were either creating it, taking that very strong leader stance, or B, when they came, they were honestly being really open, not sharing, confidential, protected information, but being really open about where they were struggling, what was going well, what ideas they had. The impact that we heard about from them of this was, 1, universalizing. So everybody walks away from those consultation groups going, wow, okay, I'm not alone. Thank you, universe. Like I'm in this with someone. And 2, if everyone can come at it from that honest desire to help, they got a whole bunch of ideas that they might not have otherwise had. Some things that would fit really well, some things that maybe didn't, but at least some ideas, generate that creativity. So establishing consultation groups, sharing with peers. Number 10, make contingency plans. So back on more of the hard skills of business, folks that we spoke with were looking out at this sort of vast unknown future and doing everything in their power to plan for the unknown. So, they had a plan A. If revenue persists at our expected levels, we do nothing different. They had a plan B. If we need to, we reduce bonuses by this percent. A plan C, if we still need to do something else, we furlough this percent of our workers. Here's how we would do that. Here's what the communication matrix would look like, etc. Plan D, we default on our rent. Our landlord can come after us later. I am a landlord in my other business. I also do real estate. It's not a good time to be a landlord, but they were coming up with all of these different contingency plans. Sort of back to some of our previous comments, these plans then make them more likely to be able to thrive regardless of what happens next in this unpredictable market. But also, again, back to that locus of control, gives them a sense of control and can help them map out their communication now to their workforce so that they're being clear, not over-promising and under-delivering, and they sort of know which levers they have at their disposal to pull if things go a variety of different ways. So making contingency plans. 2 more. Number 11, I love this one. I thought this was so creative. Designing relevant resources for staff. Definitely not my idea, but some leaders spoke with us about the first one that brought this up. In her workforce, she had a lot of parents that were on her team, lots of people with young kids. And now all of a sudden they're working from home and caring for children full time. And that is not a recipe for success by any stretch of the imagination. So she and some of her team members had gotten together and designed workbooks almost of things, activities that parents on her team could do with their kids. Some of it was YouTube links, some of it was worksheets, some of it was activities you could do from home, whatever. She knew that that was a need for her workforce. And so as a leader, she created it and she gave it to them freely and said, here, have this if helpful. What an amazing gift. What an amazing thing to do to help people really feel seen and supported, even if they don't touch the thing. It's a very cute in thing as a leader. Maybe you've got a lot of athletes on your team. So you come up with what are all the different, workout apps that are currently offering their free trials. They pretty much all are right now. So maybe you come up with that. Maybe you've got a lot of folks who could stand to be more educated about personal finance. So you do what Common Desk is doing right now for your team, but you have someone come in and do a training on personal finance amidst a crisis and how to navigate that. Whatever the content is, it needs to be relevant for your staff. But think about it. Where could you get out in front of it and do something that is helpful for your staff at this moment? And last but not least, create a winning narrative. I feel really passionate about this one, so I'm gonna try to stay off my soapbox, but creating a winning narrative means, there is, as mentioned, so many things right now that are so far outside of our control as humans. The few things that are inside of our control are around our attitude, the stories we tell ourselves and each other, how we treat ourselves and each other. There's this sort of very small subset of things that are actually within our control right now. So the leaders who we spoke with who were really feeling confident in their leadership at this time and starting to experience good results, they had a winning narrative around it. A winning narrative is not, in this case, something that is overly kind of annoyingly positive of like, guys, this is great. We all get to be at home and not leave, and it's amazing. That's not a winning narrative. That's just tone deaf and not true, right? Winning narrative is something more like, all right, we were around in 08 of the financial crisis, and it was so hard and so scary. And we got through it. And let me remind you, here's a few of the things we did. Here's some of the consequences that we suffered and some of the ways that it was hard, but here's what we did to get through it. Here's what we learned from that experience that we could apply now. And gosh, here are all the things right now that are going on that are so challenging, where we have empathy, we have sympathy, we have, we feel the feels, we experience it all. But gosh, here's some of the silver linings. What do you see as the silver linings? What could this time do for our business, for our team, for ourselves, right? A winning narrative is balanced. When we look at, this is really interesting, when we look at resilience, when we look at resilience specifically in children, one of the biggest predictors of resilience in children is whether the degree to which their primary caregivers share narratives of past difficult experiences and how the family got through them. And I'll say that again. One of the biggest predictors of resilience in children is, are their parents or primary caregivers talking openly about things that have happened that are hard and how they got through them. This data point to me is absolutely amazing. Like, even kids can get it. If the people around us are not willing to share about when it's hard and then how we got through it, we go through life feeling like, well, if things get hard, we're just going to crumble and die. I don't know. I don't have a narrative around that. That research bears fruit here. A winning narrative in moments like this is one that is balanced, one that takes into account every person that you call right now, every Zoom meeting that you have. You don't know what is going on in their life. You don't know what their struggle may look like. Maybe they have a family member that's contracted the virus. Maybe they're facing bankruptcy. Maybe they're just, suffocating inside of their own homes. You don't know. Or maybe they're, using this time to improve their health, and they're feeling, like a meditative Buddha with like a rock and bod, and we don't know. So go in curious, but when it comes to the story that we tell to ourselves, to each other, and especially as leaders to our teams, and if your company is big enough, sort of that content you're putting out there for your customer base, your clients, etc., really pay attention to the way that you tell the story of what's happening right now. So that's me looking like I used to when I left my house. That was fun. It'll happen again. My high heels are also lonely, but that will happen again someday. This is where you can find me if you have questions, and I would love to open it up if anyone has any questions to ask live right now.
I have a question. So when we're designing relevant resources for both our staff and putting out content for, our members or whatever that looks like right now we don't really, just speaking generally, if you don't really know what is going to be, I guess I'm trying to think of the word, but like effective or complementary to them, I don't know, just something that's special for them, or you don't know if it's going to work, is it sorry, I didn't really think about my question, my thoughts before I started speaking, but if should you be monitoring how much you're putting out because of overload and feeling like overwhelmed with everything that's coming out, or should you just kind of be trying everything to make your people feel supported? Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And it's a really good question. I wish my marketing manager was on this call because she has all these like data analytics that she does when I ask that question. But I'll try to pretend to be her for a minute. When it comes to electronic content, there are things that we can do to analyze how often people are opening it, how often they're following through. And people that know more than me can probably talk about what's the rate at which you want to make sure you're getting at least this type of an open rate or a click rate or something where to on the more avoidant side, if you're starting to get any unsubscribes or folks that are like, blocking you or things like that, that's a good indicator that you've got some fatigue amongst your population that you're trying to be helpful for and should probably stop. Outside of that though, in terms of, other forms of content that could come out, there was this comment around Overcommunicate, but I think when it comes to like pushing resources at people, we're all getting so much in our inbox right now, and especially those first few weeks, it was like every Pilates studio I've ever been to was like, let me tell you how we're responding to COVID. It's like, I get it. You're like washing your hands. Thank you. I don't live in that state anymore. Like it's not real. So there was so much inundation from everyone. So I would say it is relevant to be a little bit careful of that and isolate your content to stuff that is really on tone for right now. Really speaks to what people are likely going through right now. We'll get back to a time where we can put out cool content later, but right now, anything that doesn't really speak to what people are experiencing right now is probably just off, a little tone deaf. Does that answer? Yeah, okay, thank you. Good question. Who else? Any other questions? Okay. Well, if that is it, then I'll just thank everyone that was in attendance, and thank you, Common Desk, for having me as a guest. And lead on, folks. I hope that each of you in your various spheres are able to lead with confidence through these tough times. So best of luck.
Thank you